Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Startup Sense podcast. This is your host, Jonah Lupton. We got a great show for you today. I actually heard about Rome I think it was a blog post. I became very interested in the company because this is actually something I've looked into before. I just wasn't sure how to make it happen. So what Rome is doing is definitely relevant to kind of what my goal is over the next couple of years is to kind of travel the world and work from some remote locations, but doing it within a company structure. So what Rome does is it's essentially a subscription service. So instead of signing a long-term lease for one spot, like we normally would for an apartment complex or whatnot, you would essentially become a Rome member, and that would allow you to live in any of their properties around the world. And they have some pretty cool ones. So the company's raised about $3.4 million, three co-founders. Their first location was in Bali. They're now in London, Tokyo, coming to San Francisco, in Miami. So some pretty cool stuff going on. So let's talk to the founder and learn more about the company. How are you, Bruno?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for joining us. So I think what you guys are doing is really, really cool. This is kind of the future of living for entrepreneurs, these communal living spaces. So tell me more about the company. What exactly is the mission and the vision behind Rome?
The vision is the future of housing. So early on, we came more from an analysis of the cultural context. So we're mostly European. We tend to overthink stuff. But the way we look at it is basically, if you look at our parents' generation, they had a suburban home, family, 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. They aspired to one day end up in the corner office. They did their shopping in the shopping mall. And all of this was connected by big highways. And now suddenly we're kind of the Generation X, millennials, the first generation that sets different priorities. So we start working out of co-working spaces. We start working out of coffee shops. Obviously, we do most of our shopping on the internet, and we're also pretty open to all the changes that are going on in mobility. So everything from Uber to autonomous vehicles and so on. But at the same time, nobody really questioned the notion of housing over the last 100 years. And we're basically coming from the perspective that housing in the future needs to be more communal, more global, and more transient. So you're happy to give up your small kitchenette for a professionally shared studio that you can share with others, you can host others, you have all the latest gadgets and appliances. You're looking for shorter lease terms. You want to live in New York for 3 months and then go to San Francisco for 2 months. And you want to do it globally because suddenly it's possible to work out of really remote locations, like you mentioned before, Bali. So you can pretty much work from anywhere. And so you need a housing product that actually enables you to do that.
So who is the ideal customer or client or member, whatever you guys call them? Who is the ideal person for you? Is it an entrepreneur that just wants to see the world? Is it a consultant that is in these different cities for business? I mean, who are you guys really finding that, to use this service?
We're looking internally at it with three different personas. So the first one is who you would normally associate with a product like this. So the single designer from East London in the late 20s, the developer from San Francisco. But at the same time, that's about a third of the customers that we have. Another third is roughly people who are in the late 30s. They start questioning their priorities. They think, do we really want to spend the rest of our lives at Deloitte, or do we want to try something different? So they are more and more open to say, hey, let's give this a try for a year or two. Let's downsize a little bit, and let's figure out what we really want from life. And at the same time, we're seeing a lot of baby boomers, empty nesters, who say, hey, we want to see the world. We always wanted to do that. The kids are in college. Let's finally get it done. And they don't want to live in a hotel for 2 years, and they also don't necessarily trust an Airbnb enough to do it. So for them, it's actually a perfect value proposition.
Right. Okay. Makes total sense. So you guys started in Bali. Tell us how you launched in Bali. What did the property look like? Did you acquire it? Did you lease it? How large is it? I mean, give us a little bit of backstory on that.
Absolutely. It's a really stunning contemporary boutique hotel. Bali, it's a little bit of the background. Ubud is a small town in the middle of the island and has kind of a reputation as a digital nomad paradise. So that's where we did the original research around the product. And also we wanted to stay a little bit away from tier one cities like San Francisco and New York, which have really cutthroat, well-defined real estate markets, and try to get product market fit initially in this kind of off location. So we were lucky enough to stumble across this hotel. It was a bunch of young guys. They developed this really beautiful hotel. They had a restaurant before, And then they saw, it's actually really complex to operate a hotel. So they brought us in because they really loved the idea and said, why don't we turn it into a communal living space? So that's a lot of opportunities that we are trying to find and seeing more and more. And then we come in as an operator, either with a management agreement or a lease where we take on the occupancy risk and operate those properties for the asset owners.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm on your website right now, Rome.co. I'm looking at the Bali property right now. I mean, it looks gorgeous, swimming pool. I mean, it looks like a spa retreat resort. So now those 24 rooms, how did you guys fill them? How did you find the people that would be interested in something like this?
That's a very good question. That was really tricky in the beginning. So we basically thought, hey, build it and they will come. And
Right.
then we built it and nobody came. And so we thought, okay, it's only 24 units. How difficult would it be to actually fill those units? So one of the things that we learned early on is that it's a very aspirational product, but actually to get people to convert is a very time-consuming, long process. So fast forward about 12 months right now, it's dependent on location, but we do have a pretty healthy mix. Again, also roughly a third of people who use it as housing, people who use it more in a business context, like I want to do an offsite with my team of 4 or 5 people and it's really cold in New York, let's all work out of Bali for February, for example. And we also do a lot around short-term occupancy. So that's someone who says, hey, I just want to finish writing this book or getting this project done. I just need a really reliable place in Bali for a week or two. So that's basically the 3 main demand pools that we tap into. And they're slightly different from location to location. So London, for example, is much more residential long-term than it is short stay. And again, Bali is on the opposite side of that spectrum.
So how many members do you have right now? So you have 4 operating properties. It looks like San Francisco is going to be the 5th. How many members do you have amongst those 4 properties right now?
We had, over the past 12 months, we had 950 customers in total so far.
Okay. And where in the world are they mostly coming from? Are they coming from the US or Europe or both?
It's pretty much Western dominated, both definitely, but as we move into Tokyo and Bali is also seeing more and more demand from Asian countries. So that's also Japan locally and China, people who just want to take a month off and spend that in Bali.
Okay. Now, how big is the company right now? I mean, it's yourself, 2 co-founders, and then how many other full-time employees?
Full-time employees in total is 65, but that includes people on the ground. The kind of global core team is 14 people.
Okay, gotcha. And you guys have raised $3.4 million. Where did that money go into?
The leases, finding those properties, convincing people to give this really crazy idea a shot with,
Right.
hey, here is a deposit. That was where the majority of the money went to.
I mean, I assume now that you already have, some proof, right? I mean, because you guys have done a few properties already, and I assume that it's working well. It probably makes your negotiations going forward a little bit easier. Is that true?
The upfront capital that's needed is definitely going down massively as we roll out. So there's definitely more trust in the brand. People can look at our existing locations, find their trust. So it's more trust, less capital.
So you mentioned, San Francisco, what other cities? You also mentioned Berlin. What other cities around the world would you like to try to be in?
Right now, the focus is more on tier 1 cities because that's where we see now that we feel pretty confident about our product, how we do our breakout rooms, our kitchen studio, our co-working space. It's more about going into tier 1 cities. So we think we're pretty well differentiated with what's out there in terms of co-living and that offerings. Maybe 1 or 2 more exotic locations on top of that.
What defines a tier 1 city? Is that just like the 100 biggest cities in the world? I mean,
there's different ways to look at it. There's actually a pretty good Wikipedia page who takes the main indicators. So there's a bunch of people who do rankings. The Economist is doing a ranking. The most interesting that we found is one, and that's especially interesting in the current political climate, the globally most connected cities. So they look, I think, at global companies, including service providers, and then see how many offices do they have in each city and how are those connected with others. So it's pretty much around network density, and that obviously puts cities like London, New York, Singapore, Hong Kong pretty much at the top.
Right. I mean, certainly those tier one cities, though, have more competition, probably, right? I mean, there's obviously, plenty of hotels and Airbnb places. Certainly, I would think the exotic locations have, a lot of appeal from, entrepreneurs that want to get away for a couple months, but still want to stay connected.
Yeah, but the tier one cities have more latent local demand. So here in London, for example, we're in Chelsea, which is relatively posh. So it's kind of the poshest, still lively neighborhood. So of course you have Mayfair and so on, where there's the ground for the typical Russian oligarch mansion. But it's the more lively one, and it's really hard to find an apartment here. So that's a very compelling product also from a price perspective, that if you say, hey, I don't need a one or two bedroom, I'm perfectly fine with my studio unit, private bedroom, private bathroom, and sharing a commercial kitchen, sharing the co-working space. I don't need that in my unit. So it's a very competitively priced local product that's hard to find otherwise.
This is Jonah Lupton, founder of the Lupton Group and host of the Startup Sense podcast. Are you struggling to find the right tech team to build your company's website or mobile app? Maybe you've developed a product but need help with your go-to-market strategy, including branding and marketing. Well, stop worrying, because my team at the Lupton Group can assist you with all of those needs. We specialize in helping entrepreneurs and startups of all sizes launch and grow their businesses. For a free consultation, you can email me at jonahlupton@gmail.com or visit our website at luptongroup.co. What are the prices and how much do they vary from place to place? I mean, I would think San Francisco is probably more expensive than Bali, right?
Absolutely. So we still want to, it's still this idea of the basic subscription. So we're seeing it more from a premium that you pay above that subscription. So 1,800 a month or 500 a week gives you Bali, gives you Miami, will give you Berlin. And in San Francisco, New York, London, you pay premium. That eventually, as we roll out more locations in the same city, might even vary from neighborhood to neighborhood. So if you in New York and you say, hey, I want to be close to work, I'll work in Midtown, and I stay there for the next 2 months, but then in spring, I want to go to Bushwick because I want to take a little bit more time off and be a little bit more artsy. So the spectrum goes from those 1,800 a month up to 3,200, which is the Chelsea location in London at the moment.
And then, so how flexible are these lease contracts? For instance, every 2 months, could I jump from location to location, or are there requirements to stay in one spot for longer?
You can jump from location to location as you want based on availability.
Okay. Yeah. So, for instance, and what does availability look like? Are any of these properties at 100% capacity?
Miami and Bali are at the moment. So London, we are just open for about 6 weeks now, but that's on a pretty good trajectory. And Tokyo is working exceptionally well because there is even a stronger value proposition, because it's also, even if you book an Airbnb, you can really be sure, will your host speak English or will you be completely lost in translation? So kind of this promise that you can really rely on the place and that everything is there is even strong in locations like those.
Okay. And then how much effort do you guys put into, inside of these properties, creating networking events or, getting the members, giving them opportunities to mingle with each other? Are you cognizant of that, or are they kind of on their own to do it?
No, absolutely. We do it both from a product perspective, physical product perspective, and also from a community perspective. We see it pretty strongly as we want to give people the right tools, so we want to provide them the stage. So it's not that you have a schedule where you can choose from 5 different events each day, but at the same time, for example, we do have in each location, we do have weekly community dinner to get everybody together, but at the same time, we do more subtle stuff on the product side. For example, we do have those glass door fridges where you get your personal fridge space because you don't want to have anybody else steal your food or kind of need to find it in a complicated way. So that's a conversation starter often. So you arrive in Tokyo, you don't know much about Tokyo, you have your fridge compartment, it's a glass door, and you see your neighbor, hey, actually, that's interesting, where did you get that from? And if you, for example, walk into a London property, you pass by a glass wall and the co-working space is behind that glass wall. So you visually see who else is in the co-working space, and you can make this conscious decision of, do I want to say hi, or maybe I want to avoid that person? So we create all those opportunities for people to actually run into each other, to do something together, or to organize something for the members.
Yeah, I would think that the people, your members are more socially inclined. I mean, I wouldn't think someone that was antisocial, would jump on something like this. I mean, it's people that want to see the world, they want to meet new people, experience new cultures. So I mean, I doubt that interacting and socialization is a big problem. Are you guys?
Interestingly,
Oh, go ahead.
not so clear cut. So what we do see is more what we call internally reluctant extroverts. So if you are very outgoing, you're more this Tim Ferriss, I'm putting everything together myself. There is even sometimes a little bit of skepticism in that community because it's 1800 in Bali, I can find a place that's much cheaper. That's not really, if you want to find the cheapest place in Bali, there might even be a nice infinity pool villa that's nicer than staying in Rome. But at the same time, it gives you the opportunity. So that's also why our logo has this crappy Obama thing in the middle, because it's always this balance between having a safe space that gives you all the foundation and then be able to explore. So we do see a lot of people who need 1 or 2 days until they warm up to actually be social. So it's not natural extroverts who come in the first minute and say, hey, everybody, let's do this together. So it's a very interesting experience that we have.
Are you guys planning on raising more money so that you can expand to more properties?
We're looking at that at the moment. So the interesting question for us is, sentiment is always changing in the VC community between asset light, and now Uber is questioning, do we need to produce our own cars in the future? So do we need to own more of the stack? So the question for us right now is, who would be raising that money from? So at the same time, there's a lot of interest in hospitality and real estate around the idea of co-living. So maybe the right capital structure for us is to go back and forth between traditional technology, high growth investors and more traditional real estate and hospitality investors.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know WeWork just raised an enormous, or in the process of raising an enormous round at a huge valuation. So even the tech investors are getting into some of these real estate co-living type businesses. So yeah, I feel you there. What's been the hardest thing about starting this company? I mean, you guys have been doing this now for a couple of years. What have been some of the big challenges?
The complexity, finding together as a team to deal with that complexity. So it's not necessarily always that a seed stage company, you're operating on 3 different continents and you have to deal with everything from fiber cables that are being bitten through by whatever's locally in the jungle to there's definitely a lot of complexity. So how can you create a team from the outset that really works through all those challenges? So we did have a pretty long time actually for company culture to set. And I guess that was the most challenging and most interesting experience.
Right. It's probably hard setting company culture on 3 different continents.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And now how does your role differ from your co-founders? How do you guys split up your roles?
It's interesting. So it's a relatively traditional split. So Dane, co-founder, is responsible for VP sales for the demand side of things. We have Flo, who is our VP engineering. He's responsible for all the underlying technology, which there is more and more of. And my main responsibility is the supply side. So find interesting properties in a very short time for as little capital as possible.
How many properties do you guys think you've looked at so far? Like, I mean, it's got to be a lot, right? I mean, you're kind of looking for that hidden gem or the really good deal.
It's about 350 that we looked at. I would say about 50 to 60 of those were a good fit, and then we whittled it down to the 4 that we have at the moment.
Wow. So there's a lot of due diligence and planning that goes into this, huh? A lot of screening but it's got to be fun, right? I mean, are you enjoying what you're doing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a tremendous privilege. I don't know, one day you're getting drunk with shady Indonesian real estate developers, and the next day you're in the middle of Tokyo, and then it's rarely that you get to do that as a seed stage company. So normally you're sitting in front of your computer all day and trying to get your product right. And our product is globally distributed. It's very physical. It ties into existing local communities and ecosystems. So it's definitely interesting to get to know that. So absolutely blessed.
You're definitely building something a little bit more complicated than a piece of software. That's for sure.
In certain sense, yes, which is nice.
What's your number one goal for the company in 2017?
get to a place where we do have enough locations that we can really deliver on the promise of someone live anywhere around the world. So that obviously wasn't the case with Bali and Miami, our first two locations. So there's about 7 people who live between those two locations, and we probably know 4 of them. So we need this network density, and that's the main goal. And at the same time, also find the right formula, how we can take this to the next level. So the really challenging part is how can you develop an organization that can deliver that at scale, and at the same time without becoming too dull. So in the sense of, you don't really know when you're staying in a W if you're actually staying in San Francisco or in Bangkok or in Cape Town. It all kind of looks the same. So how can you create a system that actually enables you to give really unique experiences, at the same time still be reliable and do that at absolute scale?
Yep, I feel you there. What do you think is the magic number on properties? Because like you said, I mean, right now it sounds like a couple of your properties are at full capacity. So if I started off in London, I'd have a hard time moving anywhere else because there's just everything's full, right?
That's the thing. And mostly your life, if you're location independent, you still have 2 or 3 cities you gravitate towards. So you might live sometime anywhere, but there's still, you live between, I don't know, San Francisco and London. So you want to have, like you said, a certain reliability that when you come to London, there is actually availability.
What's the coolest story you've heard from one of your members so far about, joining the Roam network?
Oh, that's a good one. I forgot it. There was a really cool story 3 or 4 days ago. There's a ton of stories. We did have a couple of relationships that are quite happy. Nobody got married yet, so I guess that's something that we're waiting for. But it's just this day-to-day gratification. So again, it's reluctant extroverts. It's not naturally people who would live anywhere. So and sometimes they come out of tricky life situations. It might be a breakup, or that might be a tough time in their business, and then they come to one of our locations, and how you just see this transformation, to see how their eyes light up once they realize, holy shit, I really could live a completely different life. And it's really, really easy. And I thought it's completely out there, but I could just do it. And I guess that's the most rewarding part also about what we're doing.
I mean, essentially, someone could just sell all of their stuff, right? And come to one of your locations with a couple suitcases, and for the next year or 2 or however long, just bounce around from Roam spot to Roam spot, right? With just their suitcases and a laptop and a phone.
And we already see people doing that. So we do have people who've been to all 4 locations already.
And now what, in terms of traveling, right? I mean, that's got to be one of the speed bumps for some of these people is, booking airfare. I mean, do you guys have any special relationships or partnerships with any of the airlines, or do members just book that stuff on their own?
They do book it on their own, but there is, no matter how you look at this whole big cultural trend, there's a lot of companies trying to cater to that. So there's, for example, Hit List, which is this amazing flight search app that tells you when a certain fare to a specific city is most interesting. So if you say, I want to go to London sometime in spring, and Hit List notifies you, hey, actually a new fare popped up that's really, really interesting. So we try to keep good relationships with those companies and make it possible for people to consume more and more services by pointing it out to them, and by run a good content marketing program where we actually help people out in a practical way how they could attain a lifestyle like that.
Now, I mean, I think one of the big problems or challenges that many of us face when we're starting our company is to raise money from investors. If you have a proof of concept or some sort of a prototype, you can show that to them. In your case, I mean, did you guys have any proof of concept, or you were raising money just to open up the first location in Bali?
We did raise some angel money without having the location. So that was, I remember vividly, one of our first angels was Eric from SoundCloud. And obviously he's traveling a lot at the moment. It's a global company. They have to do record deals all over the place. So he's traveling a lot, but he could personally really relate to it from when he was a professional musician that was touring. And he had that experience, how it is to show up in the city and have a crappy housing experience or something not working out. So that's something that he can deeply emotionally connect to. So I guess that will be the number one advice. Find people who can really deeply connect to that. That makes it easier. And it's a pretty good story. So we had a relatively easy fundraise in that regard because people are really rooting for this idea to happen, for this lifestyle to be possible. And that's definitely something that made fundraising relatively easy for us.
Cool. Yeah, actually, I wasn't sure that name didn't ring a bell with me, but I just pulled him up on Crunchbase and I see that he's the co-founder of SoundCloud for anyone listening. And then you guys also have CRV, which I think is Charles River Ventures, and Next View Ventures. Both of them are out of Boston. How did you get so many Boston companies, Boston VC firms involved?
CRV is bicultural, and that was initially Danny, who's their most recent partner, put us in touch, and then the partner who did the investment is Annie Kadavi, and she did a couple of investments that are related to marketplaces and also tie into this complexity of the real world. So ClassPass is one of them, DoorDash. And so we felt really good about the guest.
How many investors? So it looks like you have 7 or 8 investors in the company already in that $3.4 million Series A round or seed round. How many investors total do you think you actually pitched to?
I guess 40, 50.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. No, I mean, I think that's a good lesson for people listening. I mean, that in order to close out your full round, you might have to pitch 40 or 50 people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's pretty much average. So there's this old stories of Airbnb. I think they had 137. Amazon, I think, needed more than 100 people to get their first check. So it's a process, and it's a pretty straightforward process, and it needs volume in the beginning, and then you have to find the right people who you can really connect to, that connect to the idea, and are a good fit.
The last couple of questions here. What is the best piece of advice that any of your investors has given you so far?
That's also a good one. Which one can you single out? The interesting part is investors are obviously there when all those startups, when you look at them and, they're executing so well. And at the same time, if you open up the hood, it's obviously each startup is pretty much a shit show. So a lot of this stuff is pretty terrifying. I'm trying to single out the best advice. I think it was around the founder struggles, and that was making clear decisions, so especially around zero-sum games. So if you do have those, and that's where you get to build the trust in your co-founders and your team, and having someone who's been through that, I think, is one of the biggest value adds that an investor can bring early on, because they have seen it 100 times. I remember very large investors pitching us with, and we help early stage companies go through this infant mortality phase. And I thought it was a pretty crass explanation at that point, but I really appreciate the honesty in it. And it is a little bit like this. They've seen it very many times. And I guess it's more this moderating in the early days until you find your rhythm and until you find your mojo.
And one question I'd like to ask now is, are you currently hiring? And if so, what positions and where?
Oh, that's a very good one. I think we found a community manager in Tokyo today, which makes me really happy because that's the key role in terms of those are the people closer to the customers. They really make or break the experience. Otherwise, we at the moment for the next 2 or 3 months, we're basically huddling to get our playbooks together and then go back and do a fundraise. So we're doing it with the current team, but I encourage everyone in about 2 or 3 months to follow us on Angel List now and make sure that you check back in 2 or 3 months. There definitely will be more announcements.
Cool. Any idea how big of a round you're going to try to raise next?
That's a very good question. So that's either we go for a typical venture round, which is more round price, pretty much one sum, or if we go for more high resolution convertible note process with real estate or hospitality investors. So that might be a more ongoing process as more and more people want to have insight into what co-living is really about.
And do you think that money will go towards opening up new markets or adding additional properties in the markets you're already in?
That's also a really good question. So I guess it's opportunistically. We feel really good about Japan. We also really feel good about London. So if properties pop up in those locations, we'd be more than happy to add a location in a place where we already have a company set up, where, I don't know, the Stripe payments get deposited into the local bank account. So all those million small details, it would definitely be much easier to find an additional property in an existing city. The question is just finding those properties and finding them in a reasonable time frame within 3 months, 6 months, because that's not normally the time frames that real estate operates on.
Who would be your dream strategic investor?
That's also a very good question. I think it would be mostly, it's not really strategic, but it would be kind of strategic, someone like Goldman. And what I mean there is one of their real estate groups. So the question is who ultimately will own all that real estate. So I guess we'll see more announcements from WeWork in the next couple of months, not only the massive raise on the operating side, but also on the ownership side. So yeah, that would be interesting to rethink asset ownership in the future and maybe make it possible for people to buy into the Rome network and also participate in the asset appreciation. So not only, despite being generation rent, not only rent, but actually own a piece of the Rome location.
Oh, I like that. That's a cool idea. Yeah, I think you would get a lot of traction from people, that would see it as not only a piece of their life, like a new way to live, but also a new style of investment for them, a new asset class in real estate.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest question we have to solve as a generation is who owns all the assets going forward? Who will own all the robots? And that's going to be a really, really tricky question that to be a healthy society, we have to find good answers for it. So it's both a social impulse to look in that direction and also an economic opportunity. So today is not the day to look at that specifically, but really curious to have a look at that a couple of years from now.
Cool, man. Well, I really love what you guys are doing. I hope to be a Rome member someday. We'll see. I feel like my life is kind of headed in that direction right now, where I'm not really sure where I want to move, but it seems like wherever I move, and I've moved around a lot the last few years, I tend to get really bored after about 1 year in the same spot. So, the idea of having a network that would allow me to stay mobile is pretty cool. And I like what you guys are building over there.
Thank you so much. Likewise, and thanks so much for having us today, and looking forward to seeing you in the Rome location one day.
Absolutely, man. So just what's the best way for people to connect with you personally online? Are you on Twitter, LinkedIn?
That's also a good question. I'm really bad at most things. I did have Bruno at Twitter user handle, and so Twitter was one of those early purchases where they gave it away, and now I think my ego is kind of straddled. So just shoot me an email, Bruno, Bruno, at Rome, that's ROAM.co. Okay,
cool. I'll put that in the show notes. Well, Bruno, thank you so much for being a guest, man. Really, really appreciate it. Wish you the best, and feel free to come back anytime. And, as you guys expand to some new cities, come back and tell us all about it.
Thank you so much. All the best to you as well.
You got it, man. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.